I might get myself in trouble on this one. Watch this. Observation, measurement, prediction, and validation. I think all my teachers in school, well, not all of them, but my science teacher would definitely be excited about today's episode. We're going to talk about the difference between faith and science. And what I was always taught is that you had to choose one or the other. You had to choose that you believed in science, or you had to choose that you believed in faith, but you could not have the two of them. There was either science or there was God. But what my pops told me is never be focused on the mailman, always appreciate the mail. Well, it's amazing because when you have this theory, it gives you, when you apply that theory, it gives you an unfair advantage in life. And that has for me throughout my entire life, because for me, I have never really looked at the person who is delivering the stuff. I just look at the actual delivery. And then I looked, and because of that kind of theory, when I looked at it, I could go from observation to measurement to prediction and then on to validation, which is the basis of science. Now, my friend Mike Bender, Mr. Mike Bender, I want to thank you so much because he sent me a podcast the other day, and it took me down a rabbit hole of podcasts. It talked about a theory based off of Greg Glassman. And Greg Glassman is the founder of CrossFit, and then now he's got MetFix, and he has the Broken Science podcast, which I would definitely suggest that you listen to. But I listened to this podcast article. It was in the New York Times, and it talked about Greg Glassman's theories. And then so I thought, well, I would like to listen to Greg Glassman. And I listened to one of his podcasts, and what was incredible is that he took us, and he took the science department of this college that he was speaking to. And he talked about the science that he was going to talk to him about. And he said what it's based off is observation, measurement, prediction, and validation, which leads us to conjecture, hypothesis, theory, and law, which are the foundation or the foundations of science. Right? And so when I looked at this, I looked and thought like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to listen to this because it's a science base, and, but then it was amazing because as we started going through, I realized by applying my pops' theory, or you could call it a law, and we'll get into that later, by not focusing on the mailman, the person who's delivering it, but focus on the mail and have it focus in and realize all the incredible wisdom that was coming from Greg Glassman. So I want to thank you, Greg Glassman. I haven't got a chance to meet you yet. I'll meet you at some point. But then I sat down the next day, and I was inspired by the podcast, but I just threw it out of my mind. Then I sat down the next day, and I went into Proverbs 8, and it was wild because in Proverbs 8, it states an observation, delivers a measurement, gives a prediction, and validates its findings, thus taking us from conjecture to hypothesis, past theory, and substantiates the law of wisdom. So why don't we get this party started?
Evening, we's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
I'm like a kid in a candy store this morning. I'm very excited about this time to be able to spend with you and to be able to look at the relationship or is it faith? Is it science? Which one do I choose? What if we put them up against each other, put them in the ring, had them fight? Who would win? This is what most people have told me throughout my life is like, you got to choose one, you got to choose the other. And as I've gone down this rabbit hole, that Greg Glassman sent me down. Well, I can blame it on Mr. Mike Bender, and I want to thank you so much, Mr. Mike, because you're incredible. You're an incredible friend, and I love our dog walks. I love to be able to see you in the morning, and I love the fact that you always want to investigate to make sure that the justice is done, no matter what it is, that the right thing is done. And it's not like we talked this morning about sometimes money will cloud things, sometimes, prestige will cloud things. But you, for me, are always a constant that you always want the right thing to happen, no matter how much money that'll make, how much movement it'll make, whatever it is. You always want the right thing and you always want justice. And if you haven't got a chance to be able to listen to Mr. Mike Bender, he was on the podcast. I'll share it with you. He was on with his best friend, which is Craig Coley. And Craig was in prison for 39 years. And Mr. Mike Bender worked on the case for, I believe it was the better part of 27, 28 years, and he did it pro bono. And then he got him completely exonerated. And it's an incredible story. If you haven't got a chance to be able to listen to it, it's amazing. Well, Mr. Mike Bender, he's like, every time that I peel the onion with him, it gets even better, like all the time. And he's told me about his friend Greg Glassman for years. He's the founder of CrossFit, and he's got MetFix now and Broken Science. And so when I went down that rabbit hole, it was wild because, and I want to list these things off again because they really blew my mind, because I wasn't the guy who went down the science route. I mean, I probably didn't do too well. Mr. Shores was my teacher, and I apologize, but you'll like this episode, I promise you, Mr. Shores, because this is what you were helping us to understand. Greg talked about observation, measurement, prediction, and validation, which led us to conjecture, hypothesis, theory, and law, which is the foundation of science, right? And so as I listened to that, I was so inspired. I just thought Greg was an incredible speaker. But then I just kind of tossed it off to the side. I was on my drive from Carlsbad to our house in Park City. And as I'm going, I'm listening to podcasts. I'm so excited. I love podcasting more than, you can imagine. It lights me up. It lights me on fire. And I love to be able to be here with you guys today. And as I listened to it, though, I kind of tossed it to the side. The next morning, I woke up on my balcony. I've got a phenomenal view there in Park City of the Jordanelle Lake and Deer Valley. And it's just unreal. It's a very peaceful place. And I got to sit down and I spent some time with God. And I had literally just kind of put it out of my mind. But in Proverbs 8, it was wild because God opened it back up to me. He said that mail that was delivered, right, yesterday through the podcast, don't focus on the mailman. Focus on the mail. What was it? Take it out of there. And so what I took it out, and what he showed me was Proverbs 8, which was written 3,000 years ago. It states an observation, delivers a measurement, and gives a prediction which validates its findings, thus taking us from conjecture to hypothesis, past theory, and substantiates the law of wisdom. Is wisdom a law? And people have asked me this since I started doing Inchstones. Like, why did you go this way? Are you just talking about this lofty kind of faith? How can I apply this? Well, what I can tell you is these are all the principles that we built a multi-million-dollar national brand throughout the country. We did it on principles from Proverbs. That's the reason why I want to share these things with you, because it's not just a theory. It's just not a lofty kind of thing. It actually took us past theory, right? There was a conjecture of it. There was a hypothesis that I had. It took me past theory and showed me and substantiated the law that said that if you build your stuff on 3,000-year-old wisdom, you build your stuff on wisdom and principle-based law, these things will happen. And it's predictive. Like it's incredible. So that's the reason why I do it. But let's jump into this. In Proverbs 8, right, in verse 1 through 4, it takes us, let's go to this part. And Greg Glassman, I'm excited to meet you at some point. Hopefully I'll have you on the podcast, but more than that, I just want to shake your hand and thank you so much for opening my mind to this. In verse 1 through 4, it takes us to conjecture, right? Conjecture is observation. Now, I wrote down, actually, I didn't write it down. I had some, we had the definition set up. So when I look at this, let me go to it because I think this is important. Okay. So here is the definition of a conjecture. It's a statement or idea based on incomplete information, observation, or intuition that has not been proven yet or rigorously tested. So that's a conjecture. That's what that in verse 1 through 4, the observation is this: wisdom is calling out in the most conspicuous places. Now, it's an observation. It has not been substantiated, incomplete information. It's an intuition. And some people could be like, yeah, is wisdom really calling out? Well, what God wanted us to know in this is in verse 1 through 4, wisdom is calling out in the most conspicuous places. It's calling us and saying that, hey, I'm here, I'm around, and that part of it is an observation. In verse 5 through 12 and 22 through 31, it takes us to the hypothesis. Now, it's very important for us to understand the meaning of words. Someone asked me the other day, what do you think of prudence? And I said, well, I thought prudence was I didn't ever think about it because I didn't know the definition. And then when I realized what the definition of prudence, which was just thought of the future, now I started to look at the word different. But that's the reason why I want to break down the definitions of these words. And I just looked them up. I'm not saying that I have them off the top of my head, but a hypothesis, a specific, testable, falsifiable statement or prediction about how things work, often used as a starting point for scientific investigation. There's an example. If I increase the amount of sunlight a plant receives, it will grow faster. That's a hypothesis, right? So we're on to the hypothesis, which is actually the measurement. And in verse 5 through 12 and 22 through 31, my trusty, let's see, there we go. The simple will gain prudence. So the person who's just taking no thought of the future, who is, when they talk about simple, it's talking about foolish people. And foolish is just the lack of wisdom. And wisdom comes from the fear of God, which is just the respect of God, which means that we just spend time with him, see his words, his actions, and when they're in line, then we gain wisdom, which is the right use of knowledge, right? And so the simple will gain prudence. This is the hypothesis. This is the measurement. This is something that when we look at it, it's a specific, testable, and falsifiable statement or prediction about how things work, often used as a starting point for scientific investigation. The simple will gain prudence. He's saying test that. Wisdom is trustworthy, speaks what is right, true, just, and upright. Wisdom has lasted the test of time. Has been battle tested and has been formed in the highest company. So this is something that when we go to a hypothesis, which is the measurement, then what God is saying is I'm not telling you that you just have to believe this blindly. I want you to test this out. I want you to test and see if you're simple, which means that you're foolish, and you're foolish, which means that you lack wisdom. If you lack wisdom, I want you to try out wisdom, which is the right use of knowledge, and see if it gives you thought of the future, which is prudence. I want you to see if wisdom is trustworthy, if it speaks what is right, what is true, what is just, what is upright. I want you to see if this wisdom will last the test of time. I want you to see if wisdom has been battle tested, and I want you to see if I have been, this wisdom has been formed in the highest company. He's saying test it out. It's a hypothesis, but I want you to measure it. And I want you to see if you can gain predictable results. And this is where it takes us right down to it, right? In verse 13 through 21, it takes us to the theory or prediction. Wisdom is more valuable than gold. Well, if we start off with that observation or the conjecture, and we see that, and it hasn't been proven, we look at it, okay, then it takes us to the hypothesis, and that hypothesis is the measurement, and we test it out. Now what he's saying is, here's a predictive part of it. Here's a system that I want you to understand. Wisdom is more valuable than gold. Well, when Solomon was asked by God, you can have anything, ask me for anything. You know what he asked for? He didn't ask for riches. He didn't ask for possessions. He didn't ask for land. He didn't ask for any of those things. What he asked for is wisdom, because he knew that wisdom would bring all those things. Wisdom is more valuable than gold. Wisdom will bring prudence, which is the thought of the future. It'll bring knowledge. It'll bring discretion. Wisdom has nothing to do with foolishness. Test that. Wisdom provides insight, power, and stability. Wisdom brings riches, honor, and prosperity. Wisdom walks along the path of justice. And whenever I think of justice, you know who I think about? I think about Mr. Mike Bender. And so when Greg Glassman was taking us down this place from conjecture to hypothesis to theory, he was saying that in science, if you have an observation, you got to form a hypothesis. That hypothesis will then create a theory, which will be a predictable system that you take it through. And if it lasts the test of time, if it can work through that system and you can get predictable results, then guess what? It moves on to the law. And what God is saying is, I'm not trying to give you a law. This is what most religions do, is the religion will say, no, this is our law. Whether you like it or not, you don't question it, and this is what we do. And what God is saying is, no. I want you to go from conjecture to hypothesis to theory to law. And I'm okay with you going through all of them because my wisdom and my love and my grace will last the test of time, and it can hold up, and it will walk right in line with the science that you're talking about. And this was cool because when Greg Glassman was giving this keynote to the science department at the college that he was speaking at, and you can listen to it. I'll list it. I'll actually link it with the podcast. When you listen to it, he sets them up. He sets up the audience because a lot of the audience was like, I don't believe in this and I don't believe in that. And they were against him because they were against the mailman, because there was some things in the press and things with him that maybe some people were against. But he set them up and he said, if science is this, if it's conjecture, hypothesis, theory, and law, and they all agreed because that's the basis of science, then let's take it through. And this is exactly what God is doing with Proverbs. So let's go on to law. So I didn't say the theory definition. So a theory is a well-substantiated, comprehensive explanation of aspects of the natural world that has been repeatedly tested and confirmed through observation, experimentation, and evidence. And that's what God is saying is, let's go back to verse 13 through 21. The prediction or the theory is wisdom is more valuable than gold. It will bring prudence, knowledge, discretion. Wisdom has nothing to do with foolishness. It provides insight, power, and stability. Wisdom will bring riches, honor, and prosperity. Wisdom walks the path of justice. So we move on to law. The law, which is in verse 32 through 36, is the validation. And so a law is a statement that describes a universal and consistent relationship in nature, usually expressed mathematically, that always holds true under the same conditions. Always holds true. And here's an example, Newton's law of universal gravitation, right? Here's the key feature of a law. It's descriptive, not explanatory. Explains what happens, not why it happens. It is what it is. We hear this before, right? We heard this part before. A law, a validation. It's been validated because it's been the predictive system has been used over and over again, and it continually gives results. And that's what God is saying, like with wisdom. In verse 32 through 36, here comes the validation of the law. When you listen to wisdom and apply it in your life, wisdom's application is the ultimate validation. I always thought that you had to choose between science and faith, or science and God. And what God was saying is, no, I built the science and I want you to test me. I want you to go from conjecture to theory, or conjecture to hypothesis to theory and to law, because I know that it's going to happen. It's kind of like when my pops would say, test me, boy. When he would give me something, when he would tell me something, he would give me an observation. If you do this, then this is going to happen. And then he would talk about a theory, like these things. Here's some facts on it. And then he would show me a system. I did it over and over again. You could test it out, boy. And then he proved the law. But my pops, when he would say something like that, and he knew that it was true, he was okay with me testing it all. And what God is saying is, I'm okay with you testing all of the things that I say. I'm okay with that because I want your faith to be substantiated. I don't want it to just be lofty. And watch this. Like, imagine that the perfect synergy between God and science, or faith and science. It's amazing how he shows us the observation, measurement, prediction, and gives us the validation that takes us from conjecture to hypothesis to theory and on to law. And he does it all wrapped in love and grace. You see, as he takes us through Proverbs 8, he's not saying we need to be divisive. Oh, you're going to be right and you're going to be wrong and you need to prove and battle against each other. And I see these things happen all the time and they gain a lot of clicks. But what God is saying is, no, I want you to come together, because that thing that you're talking about with science, with conjecture, that moves on to a hypothesis, that becomes a theory and then ultimately becomes a law. Those are things that are in line with my love. I want you to observe things. I want you to do that. I want you to test it out. I want you to have a predictable system that you say, like, oh, well, I want to see this. I want to prove it. And then he wants us to bring it to law, which it will be a result, a statement that describes a universal and consistent relationship in nature, usually expressed mathematically, that always holds true under the same conditions. And when we seek wisdom, it's incredible, and he wants to substantiate that. See, God has the power to solidify his word through so many sources. And you will see them when you listen to my pops. Boy, never focus on the mailman. Always appreciate the mail. And I want to tell Mr. Mike Bender, I want to thank you so much for always giving me an example of righteousness in my life and telling me about your friend Greg Glassman. When you told me about him in the very beginning, and you told me about CrossFit, and you told me about all the things, and you know, I had listened, but I had never actually listened to his voice. And what I want to say to you, Greg, I haven't got a chance to meet you yet, but I can't wait to meet you, because I want to shake your hand and I want to thank you for your wisdom. I want to thank you for your wisdom, and I want to thank you for helping me to not have to choose between science and faith, but substantiate the perfect synergy between the two. Can't wait to meet you. Mr. Mike, you're incredible. This has been another episode of Inchstones. And if this is the first time tuning in, this is a lot. But I tell you, I was so excited to be able to sit down in the studio and talk about this. I've been raring to go here. And I want to thank you guys. If you haven't checked out the other episodes, I get a chance to interview some of the most iconic people in the world. They give advice to my kids by name. I also have another show that's called You Have to Meet My Friends, where I go live and I call my friends randomly, and they don't know they're on the podcast till they're on the podcast. But I want to thank you guys for supporting the vibe here and tuning in. It's been another episode of Inchstones, where we go through 3,000-year-old wisdom and see how it can apply today. And today, the way that it can apply is that it can help you to understand that you don't have to choose between science and faith or science and God. There's a perfect synergy between the two of them. My name is Kelly Cardenas, and I'm officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and so.